life. Whether you're ready or not, sometimes it's rough. And it takes all that you've got, but he's been here, just waiting for you to knock, to take his hand and plant your feet on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock. I want to live my life on the rock.
Hi, welcome to Life on the Rock. Tonight our guest is Jason Evert, no stranger to the Rock House, no stranger to the network, and no stranger to the Catholic world. A great Catholic speaker, apologist, and chastity speaker. It's great to have Jason back. He's been such a great help here on Life on the Rock with various forms of coverage. Australia is the big one, I remember, and but he and his wife, Crystalline, have helped us out many times. So good to see you, Doug.
You too, Father.
And tonight we're talking about chastity, mainly in marriage and God's plan and things. So it is a grown-up topic. Might not be appropriate for some of our younger viewers. You know, I recently, Doug, this week, I was reading the sections, the Catechism section on virtue, and it had a great line in it. It talks about the battle for chastity, and it talks about how to acquire virtue just in general. And it says in paragraph 1810, human virtues acquired by education, by deliberate acts, and by a perseverance ever renewed in repeated efforts are purified and elevated by divine grace. So there's education, deliberate acts, perseverance, and it's all elevated by grace. And it really struck me the fullness of that answer, right? Because we say that grace builds on nature, right? It comes and helps us and elevates us and strengthens us and guides us, directs us. We can't do any good action without grace. But you know, when we're struggling for virtue, we don't want to just take one piece of this, right? We want to do the whole thing. Education, right? I need to know what's right and wrong. I need to know the 10 Commandments, as you often point out, Doug. I need to have self-knowledge. I need to know what areas I'm weak in, what's my predominant fault, what situations tempt me, how I think and what affects me and how it affects me. But that alone isn't enough. Knowledge alone is necessary, it's not enough. Right. I need to have deliberate acts of the will, right? I need to choose continuously and align my will with God's will. And when I keep repeatedly choosing to do the right thing, my will is strengthened. A habit is formed. You know, I grow in virtue. And then finally, perseverance, that oftentimes there's falls, right, in our spiritual life. And sometimes we can get discouraged. Sometimes we don't want to get up again, right? And as Catholics, we have the sacrament of confession and reconciliation that can help us get back on our feet and persevere. No matter how many times you fall, you begin again. And that's an essential part. And then grace, right? We got to pray as if it all depends on God, because it absolutely does depend on His grace. And if we're not praying, we're not really availing ourselves to His grace.
And you know, so much of this is a contradiction to our society, which, you know, we live in a world that wants to say that, you know, you take a pill for this and you fix the problem. You know, you really don't have to exercise to take care of your health. We can do it another way. We can cosmetically fix you. We have this attitude, especially in the West, that, you know, Father, we don't really have to put a lot of effort, a lot of heart and soul into it. And yet what you just described there states clearly that we have to make decisions. We have to act upon those decisions. Now, God gives us the free will, but He also gives us the strength to act upon it, and then He provides the grace. You know, St. Paul says 3 times, you know, remove the thorn from my side. And our Lord's response is, my grace is sufficient. You know, His grace is sufficient. Like you said, it all is in His power and His strength. But He wants us to cooperate with that by our own actions, which is a way of, you know, showing Him by our actions that we are sincere in our profession of faith. You know, and what we say we want heaven, we got to fight for it. Fear and trembling. Work our salvation out through fear and trembling. A lot of hard work, a lot of push-ups too.
There's a great quote Mother Angelica has from her book, Answers Not Promises, and she has a chapter devoted to lust, you know, overcoming that vice. And she says, and I think this is an important point to hang on to, she says, the fight against lust can make you holy. Every time you resist sin, you bend your will closer and closer to the will of God. You align yourself with His thinking, His strength, His sensibilities of time and place. You become less afraid of yourself and your weaknesses when you see the power of God in your life and know that He is ready to rescue you. And she says it's not an easy process. We fall, we pick ourselves up again and fall again. She said, but these are battles that must be fought and won if we are to be God's children. This is the way it is and the way it always has been. My only caution for you is this: don't kid yourself. If you are dabbling with lust, don't pretend it's okay, because it's not. Don't walk into situations that you know mean trouble, because you are going to have a hard time getting out of them. Don't gloss over the hard truth that sin is sin. But I like that point. One, we recognize it for what it is, but to realize too that the struggles we have with whatever predominant fault we have is a path to holiness. It's not that, okay, overcome this and then I can start my relationship with God and then I can work on holiness. We're going to become holy in the struggle, right? And we're going to become holy by depending on God, by growing in humility, growing in faith, hope, and charity. And so these struggles sometimes can be disheartening, but if we realize, hey, God, this is the path for me, right? That I'm going to go through, and He's going to teach me and draw me closer to Him.
Well, there is no growth without challenge, and we need to see it that way. No growth without challenge. You know, when it comes to any kind of athletic endeavor, everybody knows if you're an athlete, you don't grow until somebody and something pushes you to really go a little further. And in the spiritual realm, you know, our Lord allows the temptations to give us that opportunity to grow. And as we hear, you know, we are to trust because His mercy endures forever, that every time we do fall, He's there. He's there to give us the strength to keep going. His grace is sufficient.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with Jason Evert, so don't go away. We'll be back in a moment. Hi, welcome back to Life on the Rock. Tonight we have Jason Evert, about to say Crystalline Evert. Good to see you.
You don't look anything like your wife.
Yeah.
Now, you were in town speaking at John Carroll?
Yes, we spoke at a church last night, 2 talks there, and then John Carroll High School this morning.
Oh, great.
So.
Well, tell us about some of the new initiatives. I know you got some new stuff cooking. Let's talk about that.
It's been an exciting year or so. My wife, Crystalline, and I moved to Denver to be closer to family. And we've been on board at Catholic Answers for about 14 years now. And we decided that God was kind of calling us to push us out of the nest. And so we're no longer on board there. You know, they're fantastic in terms of apologetics and defending the faith. But we kind of felt that God was encouraging us to start something completely 100% focused on the virtue of chastity and spreading that among young people. And so got to Denver and just started asking God, okay, you know, what do you want us to do? And I was praying with a priest, and he said, you know, if you could ask Jesus anything, what would you ask him? And I said, well, I'd ask him, you know, show me what you want me to do so I can understand it and I can do it. And the answer I heard back is just no. Like, I don't need your understanding. I need your docility. I don't need your abilities. I need your receptivity, which is a real challenge for me because I like to go out and launch the project and put my cape on and jump out the window and just ask God to bless me on the way down and just run full steam ahead, and to learn to actually walk with Him instead of running ahead and saying, you know, God, what are you waiting for? And He says, well, you. And then I got to turn around and go back.
I'm already up here, Lord. Why aren't you joining me in this? Come on, catch up.
So learning to kind of just walk with Him and saying, you know, what is it that you want? And He gave desires on my heart. One thing I want to do is I just want to get chastity resources out to the world. I believe there's this unassembled tribe of apostles, whether it's crisis, pregnancy center workers, youth ministers, parents, people at daily mass that want to promote chastity but don't have the resources. So my dream was like, I just want to be able to ship stuff around the world and just give it out there. And so I took a picture of my closet. It had 2 boxes of books in it. And I said, God, you know, maybe one day it'll be a garage full of stuff to give away. And just waiting on God and, okay, God, show me what you want to do. And then a guy called up and he said, I heard what you're interested in. Can you fly out? And I'd like you to meet with my board of directors. I had no idea who this guy was. And he said, well, what's your dream? What's your passion? And I laid it out. And I said, look, I've got this stuff. And I've got the passion and I can speak, but I don't have a warehouse. I don't have shipping, distribution. I said, I have a priest in Mexico wants 100,000 chastity books. How am I going to get them there? And then he said, why don't you come downstairs with me? Okay, I follow him downstairs, and he opens the doors to one of his warehouses, the size of multiple Home Depots. And then he said, this is one of my warehouses. And he says,
music happened?
yeah, I bet once I regain consciousness. And
Jesus is sitting back on one of the crates saying,
and
who's waiting for who?
yeah. And
Here's your cape.
he said, we ship 250,000 products a day.
Whoa.
And he said, I'm all in, it's yours. Basically saying, you want something shipped to Spain? I'll take care of that. You want this? And so slowly, God's been doing the work, and I've just been learning to kind of wait and receive and see what he wants to do. And so some doors have been opening, and we're building a website right now, top-notch web firm. They built Justin Bieber's website and some other folks, and so it's going to be a real nice high-end thing.
I heard of him.
And the goal, are you a believer? And so the goal is basically to use social media to connect people around the world to launch chastity projects, and then we'll be able to, God willing, offer them the resources and make them dirt cheap. Like we started with this book, the How to Find Your Soulmate Without Losing Your Soul, and instead of selling it for $25 a piece, we're moving it for $2 a piece. And what's happening is people are buying up this thing. I met a girl last week, she said, every girl in my sorority at my college, she says, all the sorority girls have the book. It's because we're making it cheap and then empowering the apostles. Right. And so that's the broad vision. So, I ask the viewers prayers that we not get in the way and we just try to listen to what God wants to do and see what happens.
Can you talk about that dynamic some more? Our own personal effort, your energy and all that stuff, initiative, and then God leading you. How do you work that out in your heart, so to speak?
I'll let you know when I figure that one out. Because when I first got started there in Denver, I felt like, a dog, when they have a dog race, you see them in the cage just ready to go, just open the door, open the door, open the door. And God was saying, like, I don't want you to be disposed. I want you to be like a German shepherd at my feet, fully content to sit by the side of the master or to go hunt the duck. But either way, you're happy to do whatever the master says. And so it's been a real process for me of just trying to tame my spirit, to have a more Marian attitude towards the apostolate. Instead of being so absorbed with this masculine productiveness, to realize I'm so trying to be productive, I'm not focusing on the fruitfulness of the whole thing, of realizing where it's going to come from, of being his will and not mine. So instead of being afraid that my will's not going to get done, I'm trying to learn to be afraid that maybe my will is going to be done instead of his. And so just trying, and it's been a very gradual process and a very humbling one, to try to put him first, and instead of, okay, God's my co-pilot, well, I'm in the wrong seat. I've got to sit and let him take the wheel.
You find yourself more active now or less active?
Well, I had read a quote recently that said, busyness is often a sign of sloth, of spiritual laziness. And I really had to chew on that for a while.
Yeah, okay, Jason, who wrote that? Was it the guy that didn't want to do anything?
He was just,
I know what to write.
Sitting back up with just having a margarita. No,
I can make this look good for me.
Look how holy I am. I'm doing nothing. No, but we can get so busy because we just want to be productive. Yeah. And God is just saying, no, I want you to be fruitful. And if you are, then that'll be truly productive.
And that is a big battle for us because we judge things oftentimes by man's way of thinking. You think of what our Lord said to St. Peter, you're thinking like man, not like God. Yeah. And you're right. We think more in realm of, even Fulton Sheen said, we think big. Everything we have to do has to be big. And how many saints have said it's the little things done with great love. Yeah. And sometimes that's that. You say the German Shepherd. I think of John Vianney saying, I just lie at the foot of the tabernacle like a dog at the foot of the master, waiting to be told what to do and where to go.
And so I'm just trying to learn to be content where he wants me instead of just wondering why, it hasn't been bigger or faster or more. And just learn to say, your pace, not mine. And if I can really get into the rhythm of that, I know it's going to be infinitely more productive and fruitful.
Our Holy Father recently, last month, made some strong statements about the power of social media and how primarily the formation of young people is happening in that realm. And you had some interesting experiences where you it opened your eyes to the power of it. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I'd put off forever joining Facebook and Twitter because to me it was like, oh, come on, what am I gonna say? Oh, I'm brushing my teeth right now, like, who cares? And enough people nagged me. Okay, fine, I'll get a Facebook, I'll get a Twitter, and so I got it. And eventually teens start jumping on and joining. And I'm like, wait a minute, so I can put this Bible verse out there or this inspirational thing, and 5,000 people see it, and then more people join. Now we got 19, almost 20,000 people. And what happened is a girl emailed me an article she wrote for the Tampa Bay Times of why she's still a virgin in her 20s. And it sat in my inbox for a month. I was just so buried, couldn't get to it. I read the article. Oh, I say, great job. It's a great article. I'll put it on Facebook. Post it on Facebook. She contacts me the next day, and she said, Jason, you don't know what just happened. She said, because you put it on your Facebook, 20,000 people, went to go read my article, and that took it on the Tampa Bay Times website on their search ranking up to the top, putting it on the home page of their website. And then she said, I woke up in the morning to my friend calling me that the local rock DJ on the FM station was talking about my virginity article on the Tampa Bay radio station. And then she said, I got a call from like the Chicago Sun-Tribune, from the New York Times. There's a talk show in LA that wants to fly me out. And she was just on NPR News talking about virginity a week and a half ago. All because I clicked send on Facebook.
So now you're working on royalties with this arrangement?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. But just the fact that we don't need to be afraid of these things, that we can harness them for the new evangelization.
But I like the part of the story too that it was an article written 8 months before in the paper, right? You bring it up to Facebook, and then that really sends it out there, right?
Yeah, and so it's beautiful to see Pope Benedict doing this. I love waking up in the morning and I'm like, what's going on? I look and there's a tweet from the Pope on my phone. I'm like, what's he got to say today? And so often,
I'm brushing my teeth.
Yeah, I text.
My papal toothbrush.
And I text him, but he's not getting back to any of them. I don't know what's going on.
They're just sitting in his inbox. He's buried.
But it's beautiful to see the church just embracing this, to say, wait a minute, this is a new means to spread the gospel. We don't need to be afraid of this. We can
He's
truly
saying
use
we
it.
have to be out there. He refers to it as a digital continent. We think about the gospel, missionaries going out to different places around the world.
Yeah.
And it has to be out on this digital, virtual continent.
Yeah. No, it's amazing how things like YouTube, we've got like 400 chastity videos on YouTube now.
Right.
And I know one guy, he said he came back and he was having a hard time in college, just started looking on YouTube. And he said he spent 2 weeks nonstop watching nothing but chastity videos on YouTube. And now it brought him back to daily mass and communion. So it's a real positive means to get to souls today. It can't replace personal communication, which is key. It can't, we live in this virtual world where people think they're connected because I have 900 friends on Facebook. But when was the last time you had a conversation with somebody? So.
But the heart of it too, you want to make these materials available dirt cheap, and now you have the means to move it. And then you also have some friends helping you out, right? Other speakers that are working?
Chris Stefanik is going to be teaming up with us, Sarah Swafford from Emotional Virtue, and some other folks. And so we're really just trying to come together and bring on everybody who's doing good work, point out the great work that Focus is doing with college students, that Generation Life is doing, chastity training. There's so many good apostolates. And instead of trying to own the market on everything, let's try to stick with where our gifts are and try to lift up everybody else, and it'll be so much more effective. Like Focus, I was just at their conference in Orlando, and I walk in the door Friday night, and there's 6,000 college students on their knees in Eucharistic adoration for 3 hours straight. I mean, this should be on CNN. And the priest there said they heard about 5,000 confessions that week of college students. So there's something beautiful happening in the church.
So you're working on the website. When do you expect that to be ready?
We're guessing mid-March, early April is the guesstimate. And for now, we haven't revealed the new domain name and the ministry name yet. Right now we have a little website, jasonevert.com, and if people go there, then that'll be replaced by the new website when it comes out.
So this army of chastity, maybe say, is going to be reaching people that, as you put it, you'll never talk to or see, but can get the word to them in places that you'll never be at. Right?
Yeah, because if I focus all my efforts on how many people can I individually reach, it's not going to be that effective. Right. But if I realize, hey, the people I speak to are the best apostles, because they have friends who would never show up at a chastity talk, but they know how to bring them the message. So I know a mom in Dallas, Texas, and she gets our booklets and gives them to prostitutes in Dallas. And how am I going to meet this person face to face? We've got people in India and Africa, and the key is just these people have unlimited hearts, but very limited budgets. And if we can just meet them in the middle, I think extraordinary things could happen.
That's great. Well, we're going to take a quick break, and we'll talk more about Jason's message, what he tells the young people, and really what reaches them, right? So the core of Jason's work. So we'll be back in a minute.
Good for you, man.
Hi, welcome back. Tonight we're speaking with Jason Evert, and I wanted to shift now more to the chastity message you deliver, and I wanted to kind of craft it though. I wanted to start with God's view, God's plan for marriage. Let's talk about that. What do you tell young people about that?
Well, I think one of the most important things to understand, at least when it comes to chastity, is that it's not about waiting till you get married to love your girlfriend. You know, once you get married, then you can love her. It's like, no, it's about loving her perfectly tonight through the sacrifice of wanting not just what's best for her and feels good, like what's best for this girl's soul. And if you can begin this virtue, this mentality before marriage, you can see how well it would transition into marriage. That a young guy can understand, wait a minute, so abstinence is an expression of love? And for him to learn that as a single person, how that would translate into marriage to building intimacy. Right. That human sexuality is not something bad and dirty and, you know, we have a sacrament that makes it kind of holy or acceptable. Like, no, this is the actual sign of Christ's love for the church that St. Paul speaks about. You know, a man shall leave his father and his mother, cleave to his wife, and the two of them shall become one flesh. And how I think this makes visible God's love, look at the role of a man. You know, a man should initiate love. He should commit to his beloved. He should create life with her and then sustain what he's created. And that's what Christ did for us. He initiated the love. You know, it's not you first love me, I first love you. And then he commits to us. I'm with you until the end of the age. And then he creates life, you know, with us. You know, I'll give you everlasting life. And then he sustains that through the sacraments. And the church kind of has the role of the woman, where instead of, you know, initiating the love, she's actively receptive, not passive, not aggressive, but actively receptive. She welcomes the life into her, and then she nurtures this life. And that's what we're called to do as Christians, to accept this love of Christ and to be actively receptive to it. And so if a man and a woman are loving each other as they ought to, they become an earthly reflection of the very love of God in heaven. And I think that's why marriage is so under attack today, because to me it's the greatest form of evangelization, to make the invisible love of God visible by the way that men love women and women love men.
Right. And the Catechism speaks of like the whole sacramental structure as having this nuptial quality as you describe, you know, God's initiative, reaching out to us, offering us grace, seeing this new life, this fertility, you could say in one sense. So it's an image throughout the practice of our faith. And that the couple, right, God made Adam and Eve as a couple to be this communion of life and love. And that's, you know, made present, that's actualized in marriage. And I think we had a guest on the show one time just saying what the church teaches, and it was that the guest said, I don't even remember who it was, but they said that it's written in our very nature. You know, it's like it can be distorted by sin, and our culture can present a different view, but it's in our very nature. And I feel like that's so critical to get that message out to young people, that this is what you really crave in your hearts. You really want a committed, faithful, open to life kind of love, right? And
You know, and I think so often the church's teaching is like, well, if I do this with my girlfriend, am I going too far? If I do this, am I going too far? The problem is not that you're going too far. You're not going nearly far enough. Because the church is the one encouraging you. No, don't just give your body to your boyfriend on the night of prom. Give him your body, your heart, your soul, your womb, your children, every breath you take till the day you die. Like, give him everything.
Hold on,
and some people
on prom night?
Not prom night. You're going to want to wait, you know, until, you know, the 20-year reunion.
Make that clear.
You know, but it's calling you like to that extreme love, you know, the total gift of self. And where we fall is not in going too far. We fall because we only go halfway. And God is calling us, no, make a total gift of yourself. And that's the love that's going to reflect the love of God.
And marriage is the place where this can be given and received. And that's what our hearts want. It's not found in promiscuity or these endless relationships. We're just changing this partner and that partner. But a faithful love. Because that really images God's love for us, that it's this constant love for us, that it's irrevocable, does not die, does not change.
And ultimately, He's commanding us to fulfill our deepest desires. But because of our pride and how clouded our intellect is, we tend to think, no, I really need this. It's like that analogy where, I think in Africa, I think they put tinfoil inside a gourd. to catch a monkey or a raccoon, and it sees it and reaches down and grabs it. Oh, that's what I want. And because his fist is too fat, he can't reach it out.
Right.
All he has to do is let go and he's free, but he won't. He's so convinced he needs a stupid piece of tinfoil, he'll hold on to it until he starves to death and dies, or till the hunters come and kill him. And so often we grab onto this counterfeit of love instead of trusting that God is the one who ultimately has the plan that'll fulfill us. And he draws our attention back to the Garden of Eden, how it was supposed to be. That Eve's body, the very sight of her body, was an invitation for Adam to love her in the likeness of God. And if we can remember this, okay, so wait a minute. So the beauty of a woman, because the woman's the most beautiful being on earth, is actually an invitation to love her. It's not, it shouldn't be seen as like they're all temptations to lust. They're actually reminders of the beauty of heaven, that we can be grateful for the woman's beauty instead of seeing them as merely an occasion of sin. Obviously, we need to have custody of our eyes, but the point of looking away from temptation is to look within, to learn how to properly look, to see her as a daughter of God.
And we know the reality lived out is difficult, right?
Oh,
it
yeah.
involves the cross.
Yeah.
We've had Crystalina on the show, and she was talking about hard realities that come up, you know, when we're loving other people, any kind of community life, religious life, whatever. There's a part where the going gets tough, right?
Yeah.
Can you talk about that aspect of marriage, what young people should expect, or you know, what's this really about?
Yeah, no. One of my teachers, I always said that marriage is humanly impossible, and that's why God made it a sacrament. And I think for me, some of the best preparation for marriage was chastity prior to marriage, training me in sacrifice, of forgetting about myself. Because honestly, to be frank with you, marriage has been the hardest thing I've ever done in my life. It honestly, it has. Because this vocation is meant not just for happiness, it's meant for holiness, which means you got a lot of stuff that's going to get purged up. Stuff that's going to come bubbling up to the surface like oil and water. Your virtues become more apparent, and your faults become more apparent than ever before. And
well, you tell a great story that soon after you were married, you realized that you guys didn't even agree on the throw pillows, right?
Yeah, what was? Yeah, because I mean, I got back on the honeymoon, and there's like 14 pillows on the bed, and it's like, what is this? And then she's like, well, throw pillows. I'm like, what does that mean? And she says, well, you put them on the floor. And I'm like, when you get on the bed? And she said, I'm like, am I sleeping on the floor? She said, no, you're on the bed, but the pillows go on the floor when you get it. I'm like, wow, it's gonna be a hard sacrament. You know, and you know, but and people think, well, you know, I got to live together to see if I'm compatible with this person. But look, if you're a guy, she's a girl, you're not compatible. I mean, it's pretty easy to figure out. But the question isn't, the successful marriages are not because you're so darn compatible. It's because you learn how to deal with the inevitable incompatibilities through patience and sacrifice and saying, I love you, I forgive you, and I'm sorry. I mean, if Crystal and I didn't know how to say I love you and I forgive you, I'm sorry, I mean, there'd be days where we wouldn't even know what to say to each other, because that sums up everything. Yeah. But it's just, you know, it's a struggle. That's why the church calls the family the school of love. Because everything you need to learn to love, you learn in the family. Because you can love each other, you can love anybody in the world. Because it's not going to get harder than loving the family sometimes.
You know, I remember John Paul II in his book, Love and Responsibility, he talks about like the powerful sentiment, feelings, emotions, like when people first meet. And he says those are the building blocks of love. You know, love deepens when sacrifice is involved, right? Yeah. Now you have 5 kids.
Yes, we do.
A wife.
Yeah, we just had a little girl this summer named Angelica. I'm sure mother would approve. So,
so that involves some sacrifice, right? And dying to yourself.
Yeah. No, it just children are kind of the sandpaper of sanctity, where they're just constantly rubbing and rubbing. Oh, you're not patient yet. Let's work on that some more. You know, and, you know, I remember reading an evangelical author where he said, "What if the purpose of marriage is holiness, not happiness? How would that change things?" Because we tend to go in there, no, this is to make me happy. And then when the cross comes, it's like, wait a minute. But if we accept the cross, we grow in holiness, and then we have something better than happiness. We have joy. And you know, it's messy. You know, it's hard. It takes a lot of work and dying to ourselves, and we shouldn't be kidding ourselves of almost over-spiritualizing marriage, of just like, well, we did a novena, and you know, I saw a flower on the side of the road, and so I know this is my spouse, and not realize, well, there's a human element too. That's why you got to stay connected to your family, your loved ones, spiritual director, so they can really guide you into the sacrament in a way that's level-headed.
Now, the novena flower thing is what happened to me. Are you saying that?
Sorry about that. We had a commercial break, I think, coming up here in 6 minutes.
I made a mistake.
Nothing wrong. I love novenas, but they can't replace authentic discernment.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. You're right. You know, and it's funny because you mentioned earlier about marriage being under attack, and I remember an interview I had with an exorcist once. I was interviewing him. It wasn't a yeah, get that right. It wasn't like I needed him for that. But he had said that, because the devil cannot attack God, he will go after the image of God, which is us as human beings created in the image and likeness of God, but also marriage, which is the image of the Trinity.
Yeah.
And so by attacking marriage, this is Satan's way of trying to get at God himself, because he can't get at the Trinity directly. So he goes after the image of the Trinity, which is family. Which is
And
marriage.
it's almost as the devil spends so much energy trying to get single people to come together in a sexual union, and he almost spends as much energy trying to get married people to separate from that union.
Yeah.
So.
Right. Well, let's talk about maybe the images we get from our media. I think it's so much more powerful than we realize. We constantly see a certain view of relationships, and I even say a view of marriage, because it seems like you hardly even shown a marriage, but you're shown a lot of relationship stuff.
Yeah.
Talk about what a young person usually sees and the errors there.
Yeah, well, I think there's this idea that, these people, these images we see on TV, like this is how to find romance, that instant connection, that, just that fire you feel when you see the person. But look at the actors of Hollywood, look at their real lives. I mean, God bless them, but it's an absolute disaster.
Yeah.
They know how to act out romance, but in reality, they can't keep their marriages together longer than 72 days, and it's done. And so if you look at who's having the happiest marriages, it's not the supermodels. A lot of times it's our grandparents.
Yeah.
I remember my grandmother passed away about 1.5 years ago, and she and my grandpa had a beautiful marriage. They're married for almost 70 years. They had 10 kids. Their names were Joseph and Mary, and they would flirt with each other. They'd flirt with each other all the time. I remember growing up watching my grandpa. Comes up, my grandma kind of whap, and he hits her in the leg, and he said, "Hi, my name's Joe." And she looks at him and she says, "I know." And I'm like, "Oh, they're 100 and they're flirting. I love it." And then when she passed away, I stood beside him as they were getting ready to close the casket, and he leans over, and he's real weak. He's got like a hip or knee replacement. He kind of leans over, and just gives her a kiss on the nose, and he said, "Bye, babe." And I saw it. I'm like, that's it. Like, that's the real thing, and that's what we long for. The challenge is a lot of us don't know, how do we get there from here? And I think that's why chastity plays such a big role in laying out that map.
Yeah, it's so funny. You find that also in the music industry too, where a lot of our singers are out there singing love songs about what I fell in love and this and that. And you're right, they've got all these torn up relationships themselves, but they're singing about it. And music, along with television and movies, music has that impact that so many kids say they relate to. It's like Justin Bieber singing about love at 18. I'm thinking, sorry kid, but you know less than nothing at this point with regards to this. Like you said, go to the grandparents and those who've had this 50, 60, 70 years of marriage and know what it's like to live through the Depression, World War I, II, and the Civil War, and they're still trucking along.
I read recently that the movie Titanic, the concept of love in that is more of a disaster than the shipwreck itself. But in the music, you listen to it, they're crying out for something that they truly want. There's a song came out a few years ago, "Give Me Everything Tonight." He says, "For all we know, we might not have tomorrow." And I remember the first time I heard, I'm like, "Give you everything?" I'm like, "Is this a bank robbery?" Give me everything tonight. But what's the girl supposed to say to that? Give you I think a girl should say, yeah, I'll give you my body, my heart, my soul. And I don't want everything. I just want your body. Not my soul? Well, come back when I'm dead and you can have it then. And so the woman just needs the wisdom to read through these lies of what she really wants is authentic human love. Not just the promise of it, but the reality. So.
Right. It seems like oftentimes you see like maybe an infatuation side, a powerful feeling side, and a lot of selfishness, really. It's kind of what this person can do for me. And it maybe kind of feels like love, but I think we've got to look at it more closely. I know you mentioned Sarah Swafford and you working with her, and she was on the show, and she talked about emotional chastity, especially for the woman, that sometimes she can use the guy in the relationship for this kind of emotional feeding or use. That, I mean, the intimacy that's for marriage is not only physical, but even emotional level of heart. There's certain boundaries that you have that the person doesn't totally know you, right, till after marriage. And that commitment, that safe place is there to reveal yourself.
And I think these relationships, I meet a lot of girls where they think they're in love with the guy, but in reality they're in love with the fact that he wants her when she doesn't even want herself half the time. But it's that feeling of being desired that she's falling in love with, and then she's getting closer and closer to the guy, and then the faults start to come to the surface. And she's like, well, what do I do now? I didn't know he drank so much. I don't know he looks at porn. You know, I didn't know he builds a methamphetamine lab with his friends after school. Like, I didn't know this. But you feel so bonded and doesn't know how to back out. And with that motherly love that women are gifted with, she tries to fix him and save him and rescue him and be the Messiah. But he doesn't change. She does for the worse, unfortunately.
Yeah. And like you said, that there's something good there in that nurturing that the woman brings to the relationship. That she helps the man to grow and be a better person. Yeah. I mean, it happens both ways, but it seems like it happens especially with the guy, right?
Yeah, no, women have a gift. You know, I mean, because I always say guys have power in what we do. You know, women have power in who they are. And a woman of virtue just has such an extraordinary ability to elevate not only a man, but civilizations as a whole. And when you have a generation of women where the standards are low, that's where the guys go. But if you have a generation of women who make the standards as high as heaven, the men have no choice but to rise up, and that's what happens.
Which is what we've seen, you know, last couple generations, really, with you know, the secular feminist movement that has really emasculated a lot of men, because we have kind of followed where those women have gone, and we've just kind of succumbed to it, kind of like Adam accepting the apple from Eve, you know. She said, "I got something for you," and he said, "Okay," and we've been doing that ever since. So whether it's here or down here, we will follow. Fulton Sheen talks about that a lot, saying, you know, women have that ability. The nobler a woman is, the nobler a man will be. Therefore, if she's not noble, he's not going to be noble either.
Yeah, you know, and ultimately, nobody here is putting it all on the woman. You know, you're the chastity cop. It's up to you.
I am. Yeah. It's all her fault.
Oh, well, Eve, the woman you put here with me.
Well, no,
we're going to take a quick break.
But even back to that, we'll come back to that one.
We'll come back, talk about some practical matters, and don't go away. We'll be back in a minute. Welcome back to Life on the Rock, and I interrupted you, Doug.
Well, no, I just want to make sure we understand that. No, I'm not picking on women, blaming women for everything, because Adam was there at the fall and wasn't doing his job. I mean, it goes back to, you know, as we've talked about, men being the provider, the protector, the defender, you know, and some slimy reptile coming to my wife. I have a job to stomp on that thing and cut the head off. And Adam dropped the ball in that area, you know. So, I mean, but there's a complementary nature between men and women, you know, but nothing inspires a man for good or bad more than a woman on this planet, I'll tell you that.
Yeah. And that, complementary, that's a great word we hear a lot in discussion of marriage, that the man and the woman are a gift to the other, right? And they raise up the other. Let's talk about the evangelization aspect of marriage. I know the Holy Father's talked about it recently, that it has just this primary fundamental role in the new evangelization. And when people see a good marriage, a good family, it's compelling, right? We've talked about it's an image of God, Trinitarian love, community of life and love. And it's what we want in our hearts, right? We want a place where we can be loved and loved. Can you talk about that aspect, how that can be so convicting for people?
Yeah, you know, not only outside but inside the marriage, because the parents aren't just the primary educators of the kids, you're also the primary evangelists of your own children. And I think if the parents are doing that job, then the image of the family and the world, like you said, is just being so degraded. But when kids actually see, wait a minute, a young husband and a young wife loving each other, welcoming children into life. You know, I knew one woman who she was a single girl, kind of having trouble in relationships, and she was in Annapolis, Maryland, and she ducked, it's a bustling seaside town, and she ducks into this little adoration chapel under St. Mary's Church one night before heading out to the town with a girlfriend. And while they're there, a young husband and a young wife came in the room, and they're pregnant and expecting a baby, and the two of the married couple just knelt before the Blessed Sacrament, and this teenage girl just watched them praying as a young, pregnant, married couple. And then the couple got up and left, and she said, I want that. You know, I want a holy family. Because no one wants the opposite. You know, so many young people today, I think, are cohabiting because they're raised in divorced families and they're scared to death of marriage. So they want to kind of dip their toe in the water first and try shacking up to see if it's going to work out. But it's not because they disrespect marriage. It's because they regard it highly but they think it's almost impossible for them. And so we've
Right.
got to create the skills in them to be able to fulfill the vocation that God's calling them to.
And statistics bear it out, right? That
Yeah.
married people tend to be happier.
Oh yeah, across the
yeah.
board, economically, socially, you name it, they're better off.
Right, right. Now, we also want to give a shout out to our single people that, God is sufficient, that He is our all, that, that relationship's always primary. But marriage is this great gift written in our natures that God gives us. So let's talk about some of the practical aspects. A lot of pornography is an epidemic. When you're talking to young people, maybe even one-on-one, what do you tell them how to overcome this?
Well, I think, and this might sound shocking, but the solution to pornography is to love porn stars. And wait a minute. We have to be able to see her beauty as an invitation to love her. And we have to respond to that by praying for her, by fasting for her, by entering into doing what's best for her, instead of just saying, well, that's a bad temptation, you look away. Yeah, you should be looking away from the stuff. But then what do you do when the flashbacks come to your mind? Just try to sweep them under the rug? No, you got to remember, okay, she's in your imagination. This is a real woman. Who knows where she is today? She could be strung out on cocaine or drunk or being abused. She needs prayers, man. Maybe I should fast for her today. And then when you start to feel responsibility for these women, then the temptation to merely lust at them, you realize that that's missing the whole point. And when we get hooked on this stuff as men, you get emasculated as a husband, as a father, as a young man. You can miss your whole vocation. I mean, it's hard to even think. Do you know how many children today do not exist because their potential would-be father was too addicted to pornography to actually find his true vocation as a husband and a father? And he's just some single guy messing around still. And so we've got to really look at this thing as an enemy of marriage and priestly vocations and married vocations, and really got to fight this thing seriously, or otherwise we'll lose our capacity to love.
Right.
But you're right, sir. You're right on that. That it's very easy to write off the porn stars, to write off the drug addicts, to write off the alcoholics, to write off the people that are involved in sex trafficking and child pornography, and just basically classify them as kind of the deranged mess, and I just got a battle not going there. But it changes the dynamics dramatically when you recognize the human quality. I know John Paul II is known for saying that the problem with pornography is it doesn't show too much, it doesn't show enough, because it doesn't get to the dignity in the heart and the soul that these are human beings. Christ died for them. He loves them. They've been created in the image and likeness of God. And we can't leave them out there on the battlefield wounded and suffering like this. We got to go after them. We got to pray for them, fast for them.
And a lot of these guys that get hooked on this stuff don't realize how much it dulls your ability to love. There was a high school teacher I met in the Midwest, and she brought a handful of college guys to her all-girls high school to talk to the girls about how they practice their Catholic faith in college. And during their little testimonies, it came up that one of the guys does look at pornography. And the teacher said, well, don't you think that could cause a problem in your future marriage? And the college guy was perplexed, and he said, well, why? He said, isn't that what a wife is for? And judging by the seething reaction he got from the 30 high school girls who just tore him to pieces, he realized that, marriage is not the fulfillment of pornography. Like, porn is the distortion of all human love.
Right.
And so when we get hooked on this stuff, it just dulls your capacity to understand the very purpose of love and marriage.
It must have been a pretty awkward moment.
I would say so.
So if a young person comes to you and asks, Jason, how do I get off of this stuff?
Yeah.
You talk about prayer. You mentioned prayer, praying for the person, praying for strength.
Yeah.
Do you talk about internet filters? And
it's like you said at the beginning. How do we train in virtue? By the education. By perseverance. By
Deliberate
doing
acts,
action,
yeah.
deliberate actions, and so and through a life of grace. So we talk about you got to go to confession. And don't priest hop. Don't go, oh, that priest is from Vietnam. I'll never see him again. Let's go over there. Oh, I want some friends.
He doesn't even understand my language.
And the sacrament works just as well, objectively speaking. But in the end, you need a priest who can hold you accountable to this. Hey, how's it going? You doing all right? And you can go to him. And if you're sticking with the same priest, it'll keep you, well, I don't want to go back to confession, so I just won't look at it this time. So confession. And don't do this alone. Tell your family. There's this junk on the computer, Mom, Dad. Can we get a filter? Can we get covenant eyes? Can we get some internet safety thing? Accountability programs. So that way when I'm tempted, I'm not going to be able to access it. And that's just
Or having the computer in a public space.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's in your bedroom and stuff, then that can be a temptation.
And parents need to learn to check the history files on the computers and become computer literate. Because a lot of these parents, they don't even know how to open an email attachment, and their kid is like hacking into the Pentagon's website after school for fun. And it's
war games all over again.
And it's hard because like parents, the stuff they struggle with today, parents didn't have to deal with 15 years ago. But they got to stay on top of this, not get intimidated, because this porn industry is coming after the family, and you got to defend it.
Right. Let's talk. I also wanted to talk about the issue of same-sex marriage. Statistically in polls, it's like we're losing our young people on this issue.
Yeah.
What do you tell young people? Why is the Catholic Church preaching about this and talking about the importance of it?
Well, when the whole topic is discussed, usually the first thing you hear is, the Catholic Church, that hates gays, hate speech, bigotry, we need equal rights. But it's not hatred. Hate is a strong word. If I think that a man cannot marry his daughter, does that mean I hate fathers and daughters? No, it just means that that's not a real marriage. Am I bigoted against polygamy because I don't think that that constitutes a valid marriage? We got to get away from the inflammatory speech. It's not about equal rights. It's about defining marriage. Who gets to define this? If you look on the internet, you can see some marriages that have happened. I looked this up just last week ago. They had a list of actual marriages of people who wanted to redefine it. A woman in India married a cobra. A woman married a dolphin. A guy married a cat. There was a guy in Japan married a video game. A girl in Pennsylvania married a roller coaster. 2 women in Europe married the Eiffel Tower and the Berlin Wall. And the worst, a guy in China actually married himself. He had a cardboard cutout, 100 people at the wedding reception, and he said, I am somewhat narcissistic, but I'm redefining marriage and I feel whole again. Now, who knows what happens in a divorce in that situation, but God bless the guy. But and people say, oh, come on, that's ridiculous. We're not talking about inanimate objects. We're talking about 2 women who love each other, who are going to be true to one another. Why can't they get validly married? Well, how come a man can't marry a cousin? How come if 2 women can marry, how come a man can't marry 2 women? All of a sudden, you have no grounds upon which to stand that it should be 1 man, 1 woman, and who suffers the most are the kids. Because you're going to have 2 men who say, well, we want to have children, we want it to be genetically ours, so we're going to use a surrogate mother, we're going to have in vitro fertilization, which will kill a bunch of unborn babies, and then we're going to deliberately engineer a motherless child. And to tamper with nature in this way, the poor kid grows up, I want a mom, but I don't have one. I want a dad, but I've got 2 moms. And ultimately, children have a right to a mother and a father, but parents do not have a right to children.
Right. I'm always, if you talk to like a couple married has kids, it's so clear to them what marriage is about, and it's like, this is a different, you're not talking about marriage when you talk about these other things happening, these other groupings of people. You're talking about, those are apples and oranges, right? One's holy and sacred, written in our nature and everything. But yeah, I mean, the rhetoric out there is painting it as if this is an equivalent to a race issue, but this is about behavior, right? Chosen behavior. The inclination might be there and the person has no control over that, but it's still a behavior I'm choosing to do or not. And certainly a very heavy cross. The church has deep compassion for people who struggle with same-sex attraction and ministers and reaches out and recognizes their inherent dignity as human beings. But to love them, you don't permit or you don't endorse evil, right, or disordered acts.
And if you look at the arguments against traditional marriage, they're typically not on the logical side. They're typically purely on the emotional side. And if you draw a line between what type of argument in this, there's very little logic in it. Now, it doesn't mean that emotion is invalid, because in the end, we've got to enter into that space of that we're not calling these people who have same-sex attractions not to love. We're begging them to love in a sacrificial way. But the key is they need to understand that their identity is not their sexual attractions. Their identity is you're a son of God. You're a daughter of God. And your actions should flow from that identification, not from your sexual attractions. I remember hearing one man, he had lived an actively gay lifestyle for years and years. And then he realized one day, he said, after all of this behavior, I realized I'm not homosexual, I'm homo-emotional. I want to be held by a man. I want to be affirmed by a man. I need male affection because my dad never held me. and he sexualized his problems. Now that was his personal case. Everybody's different, but gay, straight, we all tend to sometimes, some people do, sexualize the issue. And I think what we've got to do is step back a bit and say, God, I'm going to put you first when it comes to my sexual desires. Whether I'm married, single, same-sex attraction, opposite, Lord, you are going to be the Lord of this part of my life. Because to lead people to believe they're going to find fulfillment outside of the will of God, that is not true compassion.
Right. And Catholics, Christians especially, need to preach this message. I mean, it's a message that natural law tells us, that reason can tell us, but Catholics, we especially have to be fired up about it. And you made a good point to me earlier about, the sexual revolution with contraception and things. We strip out this procreative dimension of marriage. And now it seems like we're attacking the unitive. Right? There's this special unity that's possible between the male and the female. And all of a sudden we're saying, hey, that doesn't really exist, or any two things can be united like that.
Yeah, it's all the fruit of contraception, because if two married people can be sexually united in a way that cuts out any possibility of life, if they can have sterile sexual encounter, well then why can't two men have the same sterile sexual encounter? And it's not a surprise to me, because a culture that demanded sex without marriage is now actually demanding marriage without authentic sexuality. But in the end, these people need to know that we love them, that we understand the suffering that this might be causing within their families and their social circles. And there's a place for them within the church, and God loves them exactly where they are, and he calls them to holiness and community life, not desolation or damnation, but calls them into the church to practice the virtue of chastity.
And the message of courage talks about, find chaste relationships. If you struggle with the same-sex attraction, find a person of that gender that is a safe relationship, that's chaste, and that can feed whatever it is or nurture what you're really hungering for, and not the false idea. Well, thanks so much, Jason, for coming on, and thank you for your work. We look forward to your new books and efforts out there. And any closing comments? We got about a few 30 seconds or so.
I think above all, I would just ask the prayers of the listeners that God's will would be done through this thing, not mine, that we could not get in the way of whatever plans he has, not run too fast, but just learn how to listen, to pray for us, that we could have the gift of prayer to know what he's calling us to.
Okay. Well, may our Heavenly Father shine his face upon you. May he give you his peace. And may Almighty God bless you, the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.